I voted at Legon, the Legon campus, at Crawford Hall specifically, and all of the polling stations on the campus were very full. The queues were very long, which perhaps indicates that the turnout for this year's elections is likely to be very, very high. I drove all the way down from Legon here. It was very quiet. Unlike ordinary days, there was virtually no traffic at all. I think perhaps around 37, a few cars and trucks, but otherwise things look very peaceful and calm so far.
And people are taking their civic duties
seriously
then.
Yes.
There's very, very limited activities on the road, but you see long queues as you go along. Right, so you said you voted at Legon, so that would mean you fall within the Ayawaso West Wuogon constituency.
Exactly.
Tell us of your observations. I mean, the period leading up to today, the campaigns that have gone on there between, you know, the incumbent parliamentary MP, Madam Lady Al-Hassan, and of course the front runner who is competing with her, which is Mr. John Dromelo. What have been some of your observations and the issues that have come up?
In our constituency, which is largely a middle-class constituency, academics, business people, and so on, there were rallies, some going into the night up to about 8 p.m. Things have been quite peaceful. Many of the activities of the party candidates were quite some excitable activities, loud music and young people and so on. Overall, I think that it's been once again a show of a civilized attitude to these governance issues in Ghana. Unfortunately, our constituency had that bad experience a couple of years ago, but otherwise nothing since then has happened to mar the beauty of this exercise.
Right, very well. Professor Dai-Mensah, I mean, quite a number of people have said that this year's elections perhaps has been fought, if you like, on the back of issues. You know, it looks like the political parties have been heavy on issues, and dominant in that space has been the issue about education. Of course, health has featured, but largely we've had the issue about free SHS dominating discussions, and the latter days saw severe competition between the two dominant parties. In fact, as to who even initiated the free SHS policy and all of that. I mean, you obviously are coming from that background, education. Let us know your views about how that space has been dealt with in terms of the education policy and the fight, if you like, or that competition between the two dominant parties.
Well, first of all, it's true that these elections have been fought mainly on issues. But I think that has been the trend over the past few elections. Ghana is really matured over the years. Since around 2000, we have fought elections more on issues than on tribal or regional affiliations. And I think that's a very good thing. Sometimes we are a bit too hard on ourselves. I think we've done very, very well for ourselves. People are beginning to think independently. When you look at the presidential elections, people dwell more on national issues like education, as you said, corruption, infrastructure, etc. At the parliamentary level, what I have noticed is that people look at local issues. That's why you find several places where, even if it is not skirt and blouse, you see that the gap between the parliamentary candidate and the presidential candidate, notwithstanding the number of people who are contesting in a particular constituency, you see some significant difference, which means that at the parliamentary level, local issues are more predominant. At the presidential level, national issues are more predominant.
Right, very well. But still on the education issues, the policies as put out by the political parties, FIESICHES, and talk by the opposition that, well, when we come, we're given the mandate, we'll perhaps look at it differently and all of that. Let us know what your thoughts are, how that has panned out over the period leading up to now.
Yeah, 2012-2016, education featured very prominently. Both parties tried to carry their views through to the electorate. 2016, I think education and corruption played a greater role in determining who won the election. 2020, education is going to feature again very, very much so. You can see that throughout the campaign, the incumbent president has been dwelling more and more and more on education. The challenger started dwelling more on infrastructure, but as the elections drew nearer, he also started dwelling more on education, making various promises here and there. So I think it's going to be a determining factor.
Very well.
Where it is going to go to, I cannot
is anybody's game at this point. It's up in the air currently. Professor Kakari, Professor Daig-Mensah mentioned education and corruption being major issues going into the 2016 elections. Do you see corruption being a major issue, coming into this election, as much as it was back in 2016? And if yes or no, what do you think accounts for that?
Well, overall, corruption hasn't featured as strongly this time as it did in 2016. Of course, a party must pick up an issue and make it large or small. But along the line, getting closer to the elections, you saw the NDC trying to pick up that issue and including even organizing a demonstration here and there, harping on some of the issues like the Ajapa deal and so on and so forth. But as a campaign issue, I don't think that even the NDC has hyped it as strongly as the MPP did with corruption in 2016. But it is still there. Again, the education thing seems to have taken quite a prominent place. You see that, again, the MPP are happy on what they have done or the initiatives taken on free SHS. And then the NDC, long before the December, was also making a campaign that they would do it better. And coming closer to the elections, I think the NDC's presidential candidate has been harping on tertiary education, technical education, and so on, talking about making tertiary education free and so on. So the whole idea of free education or affordable education for the majority of people has been quite a prominent issue. And again, we can go back into history and say that in the 50s, that was the mantra of the first president's party, the CPP. And so it's interesting that down the line, over half a century later, political parties are still trying to catch up with each other over who makes education more accessible and so on. But I think at the end of the day, it comes back to the Ghanaian people's premium, the premium we put on education.
Very well, Prof, let me catch you there and let's cross over to our correspondent in Amasaman currently, Stanley Blue, to bring us up to speed with what's happening there. Hello, Stanley. Hello, Stanley. Stanley, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very well, we'll try to We'll try to establish contact with. Hello, can you hear me, Stanley?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very well. So tell us where you've been and what you can report.
Okay, so actually, I'm shuttling between the Amasaman constituency and then the Trobu constituency. I've been to a couple of polling stations in both constituencies, and then actually, what happened in the Trobu constituency when I went to the Amamole Methodist Basic School that hosts 4 polling stations at the premises. So the voting actually started late because the electoral materials came in very late. And so this sparked some kind of agitation between amongst the electorate over the voters. So actually the place was very chaotic. And so it took the intervention of the security personnel that have been deployed to man the place to bring the situation under control. As I speak, the protest is going on smoothly. And also, I have been to other polling centers in the Amasaman constituency where there is no security personnel deployed to such stations at all. And the voters over there or the EC officials have actually expressed worry about the absence of security personnel at the various polling stations. I visited some 3 polling stations in the Gono and then some Odumasi electoral areas. And these polling stations have actually no security personnel. And then with regards to the observation of the COVID protocols, some of the polling stations that I went to, they are not actually enforcing or adhering to the COVID protocols. Others are doing it, but others are also not observing it. And then this election is actually very, very key in the Amasaman constituency because when it comes to the Amasaman constituency, there are 4 parties or 4 candidates, parliamentary candidates vying for that particular seat. And then, interestingly, all the candidates are new. The MPP presented a new face. The NDC also presented a new face. The PPP and then the NDP also presented a
very
new
well,
face.
Stanley.
So it's going to be a very dicey situation over there because when you cast your mind, let me take viewers.
Thank you, Stanley.
back to
I think we can end it here. We appreciate that update. We'll be coming back to you as and when we need to get more information. And we'll return to the panelists in the studio, Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah and Professor Kakari here. Generally, so about the corruption bit and it not being as heavy as it was in 2016, I think there's been the perception that perhaps the media has not hammered as hard as we did back in 2016. Of course, as media practitioners, we have said, well, that cannot be the case because we've done what we need to do and all of that. How do you see that situation, Professor Addae-Mensah?
Okay, let me comment on that first, and then I'll go back to the education issue. Sure. The way I see it, in 2016, the corruption issue was leveled strongly against the then incumbent president. And it caught on very well with Ghanaians, and he suffered for it. This time round, it would have been very dicey for that incumbent president, who had now become a candidate, to now go back and level corruption against his opponent. The tendency would have been, oh, but you were kicked out on the basis of corruption. Who are you to be telling us about corruption? So I feel that may have been the reason why the NDC did not harp on it as much as the NPP harped on it during the 2016 election. That's my reading
view on
of
that
the situation.
Very well. Professor Kakari, regarding the coverage, media coverage, do you think the media has been less intense on covering corruption under this administration as it did back in 2016?
to a large extent, I'll say that the media's exposure or coverage of corruption issues have been less so vocal than. Remember that before the 2016 elections, some of the media exposures that fed into the MPP's campaign included, for instance, the allegation that the incumbent president at the time had received a bribe of a car from some Burkinabe business person. Allegations of issues concerning the projects in the north, the guinea fowls flying, blah, blah, blah,
that,
and such other. But since 2017, such exposures have been minimal. I don't know why, but there have not been such prominent cases of allegations of corruption leveled at the incumbent president now. So that might also be a part of why in the atmosphere, corruption, the issue of corruption is there. The opposition talks about it. Some media talk about it, but it's not been as hugely present as it was in that
right. We will be interrogating why that appears so, because I think it's an interesting one we need to look at. But before that, let's cross over to Patrick Stevenson, who is positioned at Ballot 360 to bring us up to speed with what is happening there. Patrick, can you hear me?
Well, Ballot 360 here on your election command center, where we try to unpack all the facts across the 275 constituencies in the country at the moment, where people are casting their ballots to determine who ultimately runs the affairs of government come January 7th, 2021. And whilst we're on the subject of the fact, a lot has been happening online, and you have political communicators, political analysts who have joined us in studio to sort of gauge and understand what is happening on social media and how that, one way or the other, will determine the outcome of the elections, if it will determine the outcome of the elections. To my immediate left, I have Mr. Maximus Ametogo, who is we'll be back right after the short break. Well, you're welcome to Ballot 360 here on Election Command Center. My name is Patrick Stevenson, and as we've been saying, this is going to be a one-stop shop for unpacking all the issues that will be happening across the 275 constituencies in the country today as people cast their ballots to determine who ultimately runs the affairs of government come January 2021. And I've been joined now to sort of gauge an understanding of what is happening on social media and what that means ultimately for the outcome of the elections. These are facts that have been analyzed over the last 4 years in some cases. We've tried to gauge an understanding of what the political parties themselves have been saying and sort of tease out what that is going to mean. And I've been joined in studio by two gentlemen. To my immediate left, Mr. Maximus Ametogo, who's a digital communications strategist and an analyst as well. And then to his left, we have Dr. Kobe Mensah, who's a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School and a political marketing researcher as well. So these are individuals that will help us understand what exactly is happening. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Let me start off with you, Maximus,
yes.
Because in 2016, you had this very brilliant model that sort of gave us an indication of what the outcome of the elections in 2016 was going to look like. By and large, that became true. In fact, after that, people have called you the beneficent of social media and how that ultimately, determined the outcome of elections. You've done a study like that this year, haven't you?
I have, yes.
And what does that say? What is that looking like?
Yeah, it's quite positive for the government. The sentiments are in favor of the government. This is based on 107 sentiment triggers these are social issues that we discuss, from a video that has been leaked to special prosecutor writing 27-page letter, a corruption case here and there. All those things, we've been listening and following all of them since June.
That is very deep, then.
Right, so you want to look at the conversation happening on Facebook especially, where we have about an average of 5.5 million Ghanaians using Facebook actively. So we have that, and we've been following that, so that we see where the sentiment is shifting or the affinity is shifting, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative.
So the 5.5 million possible users of Facebook that you have just indicated, is that an
users.
indication that there are people that are politically active as well?
Of course, for somebody to have an affinity, when you measure an affinity, it's based on how active the person is in terms of their preference for a particular political subject or candidate or personality or whatever. Because the data we use, the data we extract ranks different subjects from media houses, shopping malls, and all that. They rank all of them per region, and then they're able to measure which ones have an affinity, a higher affinity score over the other, meaning that when they put two together, which one you would prefer over the other.
Right.
And this is based on your posts, your reactions, your interactions, not based on your future decision. So it's a history of your behavior or of your psychographic profile,
right,
which is used to determine your affinity. So that when they put a black shoe and a red shoe, you can say you prefer the black shoe to the red shoe.
And I suspect that this has been used, this sort of model and prediction has been used in other areas of engagement with some, relative accuracy. I can imagine, typical marketing companies trying to use something like this. So in terms of the regions, when you looked at the data, which regions look to be more interesting, in terms of what the outcome of the election is likely going to look like?
I think the strongholds will still hold for each of the parties.
So you're talking Volta Ashanti?
Yeah, so Volta, Ashanti, Eastern and Northern will still hold for the various parties. Greater Accra is almost 50-50.
Wow.
But I'll still call it for the government because of the voting history. There's no switch, there's no significant change in the affinity scoring of this particular region. And when you do a cumulative, the national cumulative, Greater Accra is not the decision maker region.
Now, that seems very interesting, and that's where I will bring Dr. Mensah into this conversation as well, because, you are political communication strategist, right? And you've seen what the political parties have been saying over time. I suspect you equally gauge what is happening on social media and what, its implications are. Maximus makes us understand, that if you look at the sentiments that we have online, particularly on Facebook now, Greater Accra doesn't look so, well, it's a toss-up, but he's going to call it, for the incumbent government.
Right.
Will that be your sentiments as well?
Well, I don't think so. I think I would differ, from that position. The reason why I would differ is because if you look at engagement on social media, if you observe the way that people actually converse, the demographics, and then the people's predispositions, you have quite a lot of partisan, interest, especially because of the idea that the political parties have recruited, social media army. The party have SM armies, all the political parties, apart from the smaller ones. They have social media armies, so they actually influence the conversation over there. And so, yes, sentiment analysis, we do it for brands and to test how many people actually patronize that, so we can actually transpose that into politics. And that's what political marketing means. But then you have to control for those, other values, those things that have been actually, been embedded in them in terms of the ideological sentiment, political sentiment, XYZ. So I think that yes, in as much as we can actually use that, we have to triangulate the data to look at other things that could probably bring the perspectives into it. Otherwise, we may be a little bit, lopsided in terms of gauging it. I think that
if we throw those other variables in, maybe you may want to highlight maybe two of those variables, for example, and give us a sense of what that could, potentially.
And that's what I'm talking about, the influence of the social media army or the political parties, one. And then two, the kind of issues that are being discussed at the time. The issue discussions are actually dynamic, all right? And depending on the conversation at stake, voters or people may have a very high interest in one. I keep telling people that when you look at issue of ideology itself is dynamic. And so that's why people's position change depending on what policy you throw in.
Right.
I'll give you an example. If I ask you whether you support corporal punishment or not, and then you say yes, invariably you're actually conservative, all right? You like, the idea of correction as a measure. Now, if your son or daughter goes to school and experiences very severe corporal punishment, and I ask you again whether you believe in corporal, you change your position.
Right.
Because
of your personal experience and engagement with that
phenomenon.
phenomenon.
So these are variables that actually influence sentiment at each point in time when we're actually doing political analysis or political communication analysis. So you've got to control for these variables. Having them solely interpreted could actually mislead.
Let me come to Maximo. So how do you react to that? Did some of these other variables come up, and do you have any controls for them?
The affinity score has nothing to do with the number of followers you have as against your opponent. And then it has nothing to do with your social media army on the various, especially Facebook platform. They don't use that to measure. They use the affinity score, which means the positive sentiment people have for a particular category of personality or whatever, maybe organization on Facebook as compared to others. As for those who respond and make comment on political stuff or people who have been recruited to do so, usually the algorithms of these platforms are smart enough to know and do an average score of a huge number of people. So if you pick the whole country, I'm not sure you will tell me they can recruit 500,000 social media army to influence what people are discussing. And the affinity measurement that we do, we usually trace it before even election year. And then from June to December, we do almost every 2 weeks, we do the ranking of it. So it's not based on conversation that is happening, because if you want to follow just the conversation engagement on social media, a lot of the negatives may go for the government. If you just want to follow conversation, But based on people's interaction, how you even skip your post, whether you react or respond to it, even the syntax of your construction in responding to comments, they use all that to build affinity. They use an algorithm called the EdgeRank. So it's quite complex. So it uses all this artificial intelligence stuff to be able to tell that. So it's not based on social media army or the number of audience. You can have 100,000 fans on Facebook. I can have 5,000 fans on Facebook, and I have an affinity score, maybe even 100%, and you may have 40%. So it's not dependent on the number of people you have.
Let me come back to you, Dr. Mensah. So in terms of what has happened across the country, and what we're currently doing, which is the actual vote itself, I don't know if you've monitored any of the members of parliament who are contesting in these elections, and what those constituencies are going to look like in terms of the political communication that's been undertaken so far.
Well, I mostly monitor the national as opposed to the constituency based, for the simple reason that most of the time the local elections are very local area, so it is difficult to actually follow through what is actually transpiring within the local constituencies. It's only that you would say that yes, there is some kind of national conversation at the local level, and so you would expect that people who actually voted within the parliamentary would obviously have one or two national. But from what we have actually polled in terms of our survey, iPoll for example, you realize that quite a lot of people are actually influenced by local issues when it comes to the parliamentary kind of, and they are not even influenced by the party of choice, because we ask people to identify their political affiliation, and yet they actually declare independence in their voting,
Right.
and to say that they would actually be independent in the voting and the vote.
Maximus, are there any regions you should look out for? Because I see that, on social media, for example, you have Ashanti region, you have Greater Accra region, which obviously have some of the largest populations in terms of Facebook utilization,
Right.
and the general population of it, the general concentration of the population.
Right.
What should we look out for so that as we tabulate our results and sort of get social media sentiment, we clearly are on track, and an ordinary citizen watching us today will equally know what to be following up on?
I think you should look out for John Peter Mewin Hohoi.
John Peter Mewin, that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah. He has a very high affinity score in the voter region.
Right.
He's been consistent throughout the whole of this year. And of course, his affinity score is even higher than 6 of the opponents' political
Fantastic.
elements put together.
Well, we are going to end this conversation here. This is Ballot 360. We try to gauge what is happening on social media and what's the role social media is going to.
Right, so coverage of the 7 December 2020 general elections continue right here on your election command center, and indeed we are bringing you up to speed with everything that you need to know from all the nooks and crannies of the country. And not too long ago we had reports that the Vice President of the country, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, cast his vote in Wale Wale. We'll go straight over to have some pictures from the scenes there where Mahamudu Bawumia, the Vice President of the country, went in to cast his ballot at a polling station in Wale Wale, where he comes from. And so you can see in your shots there, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia in their smock, I believe it's blue and white, and acknowledging people standing by the roadside as he walks, I believe, towards the polling station, or moving from the polling station to his car, whichever it is. We will figure that out as we go along watching this video. So you can see in your shots there people standing under trees. I believe that's a polling station where Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia is going to cast his vote. And indeed, as Martin said earlier on, when the president and indeed former President Dramani Mahama went to cast their vote, I mean, we definitely, would know who Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia would be voting for in terms of the presidential ballot. So we see Dr. Bawumia washing his hands there, obviously following the COVID-19 protocols, getting tissue to wipe his hands there. And I believe next will be for him to approach the EC. Okay, no, so his temperature is being taken now, obviously still in compliance with the COVID-19 protocols. Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia about to cast his vote. And we will be bringing you all of that as we go along. So I'm sure he's going to move on now to the EC officers to pick a ballot paper, but before that he would have to check that his name is in the reference list. Then he would proceed accordingly. So he's approached the table where the EC officials are seated. Again, he's given some sanitizer to wipe to sanitize his hands. We have reports that he granted an interview, and so we will be playing that momentarily as we go along. So Dr. Bawumia, currently in your shots there, going through the processes that would end in him casting his ballot. So he's now before the EC official, and I believe cross-checking that his name is in the reference list. Right, so he's been directed to move on next to another EC official, I believe. Okay, so he's going to be given the ballot sheet. Then he would move to the secluded area where he's going to cast his ballot secretly. So you see the EC official stamping the back of the ballot, which is an important thing that you should, as a voter, ensure that is done. Now in your shot, we see Dr. Bawumia dropping his ballot paper in there after casting, indicating whoever he is voting for. He's moving on next, and I believe to get the sheet for the parliamentary vote. So he's been given the ballot paper for the parliamentary vote, and indeed you see the EC official there stamping the back again, and he's been given that. So he'll go into the booth to make his choice as to who he wants his member of parliament to be. So we see Dr. Bawumia there secretly casting his ballot in the booth for the parliamentary poll. He's done that rather expeditiously. Wow. So he's going to drop that ballot paper in the ballot box designated for the parliamentary poll. So he's dropping it there, right there. You can see him posing for a picture to be taken. That's a photo, a photo opportunity right there. So yes, Dr. Bawumia has done that, acknowledges the people around, says thank you to them, and he wipes his hands in the tissue to get off the ink.
Ladies and gentlemen of the
Now we
press,
can listen to him.
I have just exercised my constitutional duty in casting my vote here in Pirga at my polling station, Pirga DA Primary School. I want to encourage everybody to come out and exercise their vote. I think it is the biggest constitutional responsibility that we have. And as you can see, I came here, went through all the COVID protocols, and it has gone very smoothly. I have cast my vote, and everybody should be patient and carry out this most important constitutional duty. We want to vote very peacefully. This is the most peaceful country in West Africa. And at the end of this election, we want to maintain that reputation as the most peaceful country in West Africa. We don't want to exercise this franchise in peace, and there should be no issues of disruptions or whatever. So we want to wish the Electoral Commission well, we want to wish all Ghanaians well, and we should make our nation proud. And let's come out and vote, regardless of your party. Come out and vote, exercise, and do it peacefully. And then when you are done, you go home. At the end of the day, the votes will be counted, and the winners will be declared. And we will proceed with our democratic processes after that.
Right, so those were scenes from Wale Wale where Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia cast his vote, calling on us to make the nation proud. We will be wrapping up here briefly with our panelists here, Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah and Professor Kwame Kakari. So quickly, Professor Adai-Mensah, your concluding remarks, anything you want to say to the viewing public?
Yeah, I said I would like to come back to the issue of education after we had spoken on the issue of corruption. If you look at the way the two major parties approached the campaign with regard to education, you see that with the NPP, they reiterated what they had done regarding the free SHS. At a time when the NDC was dwelling more on its infrastructural record, I think, or the way I saw things, somewhere along the line, the NDC may have realized that, well, these free SHS people, they are now going to enter the universities. They're finished with the free SHS. They've got the benefit that was promised them. Why don't we give them some promise, whether achievable or unachievable, for the time that they are about to enter the university? And I think that's when they also brought up this Chimpe and Fanina business. Right. Whether that will wash or not, today will decide.
Very well.
And whether that can be done if they are able to win the election is another issue that will be addressed depending upon the outcome of today's elections.
Very well. Thank you for that, Professor Ivan Addae-Mensah. Professor Kakari, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, well, again, I think this election is very interesting and quite a mark of progress for this country. When you consider that in this year's election, we have 3 female presidential candidates and also more presidential candidates than ever before. It means that people have the ambition to want to lead this country. The issue of education that Prof has been talking about is so prominent in our lives that I'm not too sure that it's going to recede from the priority list of elections as we go along, because education has been a central feature of our politics since before independence.
Since 1951.
Yes, it's been the central thing for politics. And some of the debates, really, if we were to go in details, reflect some of the debates in those years also.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, so I think it means that we, the public, Ghanaian public, must also therefore use these occasions to demand accountability of progress from the people who run our lives, our affairs. Yeah.
Right, exactly so. Accountability is a key word here as we head towards the polls to cast our vote. Right about now, we'll be linking over to, or crossing over to Johnny Hughes, who's on standby, ready to give us some analysis. Over to you, Johnny.
Thank you very much. It's been an interesting conversation you're having there. I mean, education is critical. The key concern is whether or not we should continue politicizing it, given the fact that the future rests heavily on education. But here we are. I mean, the people will decide. And I'm excited that we've seen the incumbent president, we've seen the ex-president who's also looking for a second chance, both vice presidential aspirants as well going there. I'm learning that Bridget Jukbenuku of the PPP has also cast their vote. And we're following closely and watching keenly. It should tell you out there to go out there and vote and be peaceful about it. It's not,
and wear your mask.
Yes, wear your mask and vote and be a good citizen. Don't go and foment trouble and fight. It will not end well, as the military and police have warned us that if you come fomenting trouble, they perhaps may beat you boot for boot. So be careful out there while you go and vote. Vote and go home. You can come back and come and observe the counting later after 5 p.m. when polls have ended. And also, you can keep up with us on Election Command Center on TV3, 3FM 92.7, on Nuya 95.1 FM, Connect 97.1 in Takrady, Akoma 87.9, 3news.com. All of that is here on your Election Command Center. There are 38,622 polling stations across the country, 275 constituencies, 12 presidential candidates, but there can only be one election command center, and we are the specialists. So keep up with us, and what you see on your screens are people out there who are seeking to exercise their franchise as well. Everybody has a chance to vote, and for those who miss a chance to vote during the special voting, or if you like, the early voting period, the Electoral Commission says once you walk up to the polling station today, you will be able to cast your vote. So go out there and cast your vote. Don't try to vote twice. Wear your mask. Be a good citizen. Don't fight. If ever you identify a situation that you think is a security threat that requires attention, please call the attention of the security detail at the polling station. It's important. Don't take the law into your hands. And we know you support your various political parties. Don't wear party paraphernalia to the polling stations, and remain peaceful as much as possible. We'll return with a conversation on security. Brigadier General Nunu Mensah will be here. Also, COP Bright Tudoro and lawyer Bobby Banson. Thank you, Abena. We'll see you after the break.
Sure.
Are we released or
Temporarily.
day, citizens of Ghana. I Akukian paying some nane can shot. Winner for TV3 talented case this year 2020 and peace ambassador because I am a citizen. I am pleading for peace. Asumdwe wafia eye shaping peace together. MPP, NDC, PPP, CPP, JFP, GUM, Muna Mayam Pitripi, then Patrapa, then Kaka Chilabi, Nichilabi, Bedi Ampo, Bedia Bediasa, Moya or Bufa Dadefa, or Chichida Crow, Aji Amang. We need peace. Peace is the key to every nation. Ghana Muntie, Ghana Muntie, Ama Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah Ghana. We need peace. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the president of the nation. Wadaroma. We need peace. Peace is the key to success. In Hausa, it means I'm talking to you all. Thank you. Oh, you are down. Nagodi, Empuya Kapa, Medemase, Ashankushu, Empuya Zozo. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Hey guys, your boy from Promise here. I just want to urge everybody to go out there and vote, but make sure you're voting peacefully. Go out there, cast your ballot, vote for who you want to vote for, and let nothing influence you. We want peace, no war. Remember, we are one people, together as one. So let's do this one for Ghana. Your boy from Promise. One love.